Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Brianne and this is Diary of a Homemaker. Today we are back in the kitchen and we are going to do some from scratch cooking. We make so many of our things from scratch and I really wanted to share that with you all. Today we're actually going to be making black bean burritos. I had made some enchilada sauce from scratch the other day. It was my first time ever making that and I am completely shocked at how easy it was. Maybe I'll end up sharing that with you in another video, but today I'm just using up the remainder of what we have left and making it into something new. I thought it would be a great way to use up the rest of this, so I simply just added that to the black beans. I buy all of my beans or legumes in bulk and I buy them from Azure. I dry them, or I buy them dried because they just last so much longer in the pantry. My sister actually gifted me this Instant Pot and I no longer can beans. I simply just try to plan ahead and end up using my Instant Pot to make beans whenever I need beans. I did pick up this poblano chicken broth from Aldi over on like the discounted or discontinued or seasonal aisle. So I did end up using that in place of water, as well as the enchilada sauce. So all I did here was add the dry beans, the leftover enchilada sauce, the poblano chicken broth, and I did go ahead and chop up an onion and add to it. I used to eat Taco Bell all the time and their bean burritos were one of my favorites, and I loved the little pieces of onion that you would get in the burrito. So that's why I did go ahead and add that to the bean mixture. These are onions that I got at my last trip to Costco, my very first trip to Costco actually, and some of them I'm just not very impressed with. I am wondering if maybe they are the rest of last year's onions and that's why some of them aren't looking so hot, but this one had a bad piece in the middle, so I just ended up taking that out and then that part will get composted. Once I do get everything in the pot, I end up adding my homemade taco seasoning. If you guys want to see how I make this, I can definitely do a video of that for you. It is so simple and you probably already have all of the ingredients in your pantry. That way you don't have to buy those pre-packaged seasoning mix at the stores that have some questionable ingredients in them, and I find it to be just much more cost effective. So I do go ahead and put the lid on my Instant Pot. I was so scared of my Instant Pot when I first got it. I thought the lid was just going to blow off. That doesn't happen. I love my Instant Pot. It's actually one of my favorite kitchen appliances now, and I honestly don't know what I would do without it. But I did go ahead and set my timer for an hour. I do find that I get my best results whenever I do it for an hour. That way I make sure all of the beans are cooked all the way through. So after they're cooked, I go ahead and take the lid off. I did let them set for just a little while to cool down just a little bit. They are extremely hot after they are done cooking. I then take my immersion blender, and this is probably my second favorite, or not, if not my favorite. I love my immersion blender, and I just stick it in there and it blends up everything really nicely. I really like it because I don't have to put it in a blender and dirty an entire blender. I can just stick that one end in there and then blend it up, and then I only have that one piece to wash. So this part doesn't take very long. It took me maybe 3 minutes to do. Once you get like familiar with the immersion blender, you can tell there's like a sound once it gets like a hold of the food, and then you can tell that it's really blending like it's supposed to. So after I get done with that, I do find that it is still quite watery. I did end up adding that enchilada sauce, which did add some moisture, and I didn't really take that into account whenever I was cooking them. So I do decide to go ahead and pour the beans into a stock pot and go ahead and try to cook them down just a little bit to get rid of some of the moisture in them and just give us a thicker consistency. So while the beans are cooking down, I need to go ahead and get started on the homemade tortillas. If you have never made homemade tortillas, you are missing out. I swear there is no comparison. They are the simplest thing to make. They are delicious. So all you're going to need for the tortillas is flour. I did go ahead and double this recipe because I wanted to have extra for eating this week, and then whatever we don't eat in the next couple of days, I'll just go ahead and freeze. This recipe called for 3 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of salt, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, and 1 cup of milk, and then half a cup of butter. You go ahead and mix all of the dry ingredients together, and then you go ahead and melt your butter with the water. So I find the easiest way to do this is actually to go ahead and just add the butter to the water in a little saucepan, and I go ahead and turn the heat on. I don't bring it to a boil. I just heat the water up enough that it's going to melt the butter, and then I go ahead and turn it off so the butter can melt the rest of the way. Like I said, the goal is not to boil the butter, it's just to get the butter melted, and if I turn it up for just a few minutes and then turn it off, it does help the butter melt pretty easily, and then I can just go ahead and add that to the flour mixture. You can see here, this is what I'm talking about. You just add the butter to the saucepan and it works out really well. So while that is melting, I do take a moment to just go ahead and clean up a little bit. I am not a clean baker or cooker or person in the kitchen. I am that person that makes a lot of mess. So I do try to pick up and clean up a little bit as I go, just so it isn't quite as overwhelming whenever I'm done with a project. Next, we need to butter our casserole dish. I do use just a whole, like a stick of butter, and I just smear it on there. We, I should say, are really trying to get away from conventional cooking sprays or non-cooking sprays. We just don't love the ingredients in them, and so we are really trying to do our best to steer away from them. So I'm just wiping all of the edges just so our tortillas don't stick. Once the beans have cooked down to a decent consistency, I do go ahead and remove them from the stove, and then I just set them in the back to cool down. And I did let them cool down for quite a while. I knew as the beans would sit, they would continue to thicken, and they did. Then I start adding the butter to the flour mixture, and this is where we're going to start kneading our dough. I do just take a spatula and mix it in as much as I can. This bowl is very full, so I'm doing my best to try not to let it spill over, but I want to get it just mixed enough. That way I can pour it out on the counter and then knead it for just a couple minutes, just so I can get them combined. after I do get the dough kneaded just a little bit to get them combined, I go ahead and tear off a piece of parchment paper. I find the easiest way to roll out tortillas for now until I get a tortilla press is to simply fold a piece of parchment paper in half. I go ahead and pinch off just a small piece of dough and then kind of flatten it out with my hands, and then I can use a rolling pin to roll it out to the thickness that you want. You don't want something so paper thin that it's going to rip, but you want it thin enough that it's not going to be like a flatbread or a pita bread. You want it to be a very thin consistency. And the actual cooking doesn't take long at all. It really only takes just a couple minutes, and you'll see it bubble up, and then that's when you know when to flip it. So after I have a few of the tortillas done, I go ahead and start dishing out the bean mixture. It is still quite runny, but it does end up being just fine. I was able to fit 6 or 7 of them in the pan. So once I got them covered, I went ahead and topped them with the remaining enchilada sauce and then our favorite mozzarella cheese that we get from Azure. After I got the burritos in the oven to warm up, I went ahead and just dish out the rest of the beans. We'll probably just eat this over the next couple of days with some of the tortillas. I don't think it's going to last very long in this house. So that is it. I went ahead and only warmed the burritos up for maybe 10 minutes or so at 350, and then we started dishing them out for lunch. So if you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I am loving sharing some of our cooking from scratch with you all. Like I said, we make so many things from scratch, and I am just excited to share more of that with you all. If you're still here, thank you again for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.